Good morning, campers, and welcome to Radio Camp Half-Blood, a Percy Jackson read-along podcast. I'm B.
And I'm Zach.
And this week we read Chapter 11 of Percy Jackson, The Titan's Curse. Grover gets a Lamborghini.
Oh, Mamma Mia, here we go again.
Here we go, talking about another misdirecting chapter title. Oh my god, literally last episode I was like, there's no way that Grover gets a Lamborghini could mean anything other than they get a new car to hide their identity from the military monster people who are pursuing them. And that is not what happens. He somehow managed to even make that a misdirect.
In my head, I was like, how could Grover afford that car with his type of income? That's kind of an expense he can't afford.
I know. Also, how does he drive with his little hooves?
I'm not a goat expert, but I'm pretty sure if you have hooves for legs, you still can push the gas and brake pedals. I just imagine like a special Seder mobile would have like little like circles, like just perfect for like hooves.
Yeah, exactly. Little circles, and they would like, I don't know, they'd be made out of like a different material that wouldn't get all messed up by like a hoof. I don't know.
But yeah, it's a total misdirect with this chapter because technically it's true, but once again, it's false because he does get a Lamborghini. Well, technically everybody gets like a nice luxury car. It's one of those great chapters I like to call like a transition chapter because they get to pretty much halfway across the United States in a chapter rather than taking like 6 chapters like the first Lightning Thief where it's just like, we stopped here.
They get a shortcut. That's pretty helpful. I was kind of relieved by that because I'm like, oh god, do we have to like really describe every little bit of them getting across the country? Because they're only in DC, which, you know, that's kind of a ways away.
The cool thing that I noticed with this chapter as well is my favorite thing is here we get a very slow burn of a chapter where things kind of like slow down because in a lot of like action movies, here it's like when you have like a huge like action beat, you need a part where you can like slow down and kind of like regroup and like recoup kind of the words and stuff you're going to use because if it was all action, it'd get really dull. Here, you know, things slow down. It becomes a slow burn as we talk about Grover, we talk about Percy, we talk about Zoe, a lot about Zoe, and we also talk about Bianca.
A lot about Zoe, and there's also a dream sequence. There's a lot that happens in this chapter, and yet not a lot of action necessarily. I mean, it's some in the beginning because they're still escaping, but yeah, I like chapters like this because it lets you kind of acclimate yourself to, I guess, the vibe of the story, and it makes you feel like more immersed than just like action, we're going from one thing to another. Like, we get to calm down a little bit. They're all sitting together, they're talking to each other about what's going on in the plot. There's a lot of conversation that happens between Percy and Talia, Percy and Grover. Like, he gets to, well, actually Grover's asleep in the backseat, I think.
For me, I always enjoy slow burn chapters. Like, it's great to see, like, action sometimes. Like, this is the thing I've noticed throughout Rick Riordan, like, as rereading this, the very slow pace that we are, is there's a kind of like a mini formula going into play here. Like, there'll be, like, a huge action chapter, and then there will always be, like, an exposition chapter, or there'll be a chapter explaining things, like, developing the characters, but there'll always be enough action chapters for it to be entertaining. I think maybe that might be like a misconception for Percy Jackson a little bit of having like there's all it is like super epic like action, but when you like really think about it, it's not.
No, I agree. I was thinking the same thing because I was thinking actually back to the Lightning Thief because I'm pretty sure there's also a scene where they're on a train and we had almost this exact conversation too where it's Percy and Annabeth are having a conversation. It's a similar sort of thing where we're just off the heels of some sort of action scene. I actually don't remember where they were coming from. Was it when they had the whole thing with from the Chimera fight?
I remember this conversation because this is when the Gateway Arch kind of blows up, and we were confused, like, why wouldn't the trains not stop? Like, if this was like a, so quote-unquote, like, terrorist attack?
Oh, right. Yes, you're right. I remember that. Okay, so it is literally right after a fight that they have at a landmark, which is super similar to them having a fight with monster at a museum and then trying to escape. It's like there's a strong pattern here, and I'm not judging Rick necessarily because it's a pattern that works, but it is like a formula.
We're developing a pattern here. If we get one more, like 3 makes a pattern, I think 4 makes a sequence, and 2 makes a coincidence. Like here, they're pretty much like developing like a pattern. Like I wouldn't be surprised if there's like another landmark that happens or something super crazy happens, and then
they process it by going on to some sort of like form of transportation where they have like a lot of downtime and they aren't being immediately pursued, because that is kind of difficult to do, especially in an actiony kind of story. And then in this specific story, Percy is being pursued because his scent was picked up by like the skeleton soldier creatures or whatever. So like they have his scent, and so you kind of get this sense of like, oh, they're like these predators that won't stop. They don't sleep. They'll just pursue him forever. But they just lose his scent long enough for us to like feel this false sense of security and, you know, calm down a little bit, get to like have a little bit of exposition of them talking about what's happening.
Another thing with this book is that, Annabeth isn't here, and a lot of the fight scenes in the past books have been Percy's an idiot and doesn't know how to defeat them, and
That's
Annabeth
true.
kind of gives him a solution, or, Percy has to improvise because both Annabeth and Grover or Tyson, whoever, is in danger. And here it's a little different because Percy is kind of like on his own because Zoe doesn't trust him, Bianca doesn't trust him. Thalia, she's like lukewarm a little bit. Mind the pun.
Oh,
And Grover is, just Grover doing Grover things.
yeah, Grover's kind of a bumbling moron. No offense to Grover, but he kind of is.
Yeah, and that's the great thing about this chapter is I love when you have situations where things slow down. Like here is a perfect setting. We'll get to is when they're on the train, but I like the idea is this chapter opens up and they're driving in the black van, like the free candy van, I like to call it.
Yeah, the creepiest van ever.
Conveniently, it does say free candy on it, or it says, here it says free ambrosia.
Yeah, Child Snatcher, Chitty Chitty Bang Bang van. They're driving along. They're very conspicuous. There are helicopters above them and easily recognize them.
And as they're driving, they hear the faint whisper of Fortunate Son.
Yep, exactly. It's pretty bad.
So like they look up into the sky and it's not a bird, it's not a plane, it's an attack helicopter.
It is.
Which is insane to think about because this is Washington, D.C. And once again, you would think that that thing would be shot out of the sky faster than 3 heartbeats.
So yeah, we also learned something interesting is that the general uses mortals as mercenaries, which is interesting.
Yes, and I thought that was so unique because the idea of that a god is going to use mercenaries, but it makes sense because, mercenaries will work for...
They're disposable to them, yeah.
Also, it keeps in the method of, like, using, like, someone like Blackwater, I guess that organization, where, they don't really care who they're fighting for as long as the person's paying them. There's no loyalty to that.
They have no connection to anything, yeah. Exactly. They literally can't even tell what they're fighting, I don't think, because even Percy says, like, do they know that they're monsters? And then Zoe says, I do not know how much they see through the mist. I doubt it would matter to them if they knew the truth. Sometimes mortals can be more horrible than monsters.
Well, it makes sense because even if they found out they were monsters, like actual like Greek monsters, as long as they're paying them, they could be whatever they want to be. They don't care. That's the cool thing about mercenaries in that way. It's just their loyalty can pivot. For all they know, like Percy could give them gold and they would help fight for Percy. And now we have the scary thought of that, once again, like in the first book, Percy Jackson isn't just fighting gods and monsters, he's fighting men.
He's fighting people, yeah, which is similar to the police pursuing him, but in this case, it's like people who've been bought off. So it's not actually the police. He's not like wanted, like the whole like on the lam comparison that we were making in The Lightning Thief, where they thought that he was a criminal. In this case, it's like they know that he's not a criminal, but they are criminals because they're like bought off by this guy.
And the scary thing, though, is that who can you trust? Like, anyone could be a mercenary.
That's true. That's horrifying to imagine. Because it's like, it's one thing if it's a monster, like you could usually tell if someone's a monster because Percy has like that sense that someone is a monster. Like all demigods can tell if someone's a monster because it's just like a sixth sense to them. But if it's a human, but it's just a distrustworthy human who's being, paid by someone else, that's a whole other thing. There's literally no one who they could trust. So that's kind of a scary thought.
Well, they are monsters. They're just wolf in sheep's clothing.
It's horrifying.
And I like that. That's such a cool dynamic of Percy Jackson, like things that you didn't think about. I remember there's a book called Cirque du Freak, and halfway through that book series, they get a bunch of mercenaries because it's like, well, we need vampire hunters, so let's get these people. And it's so stupid. It's one of the funniest, stupid things in that book, other than that movie.
Other than the movie, yeah, I was just going to say I heard the movie was pretty bad.
Well, the movie has like the super badass vampire. Like he's the type of badass, like the way to describe him is all he is badass. Like he wakes up and he's badass. He's like, he does cool things. He does things finessely. Take a guess who they casted as this badass vampire who's badass.
Wasn't it wait. I know who it is. Wait. John C. Riley, wasn't it?
Yes, yes. John C. Riley is not what I think of when I think of badass.
No, no, he's not normally what I think of when I think of badass.
On a sliding scale, he's like past like once you break the scale, and it's the scale like little thing is like sliding back.
Right, if it slides back around to like cuddly teddy bear man, sort of. But yeah, so the mercenary thing is kind of freaky. I find the idea of humans being involved kind of interesting because there is certain moments when you're reading these books where you go, wow, all of this is happening without humans really noticing. And it's kind of like an interesting concept when you think about it. Like there's this whole war brewing and there's all these factions of like gods and demigods and titans, and like they all have their allegiances and their plans and their schemes, and the humans are walking around so oblivious to everything. And it's like Muggles, basically. It's a similar kind of concept where they're just like, there's this whole tale of intrigue and war that is happening right under the noses of all these like kind of idiot people who don't know what's happening. And then I like that there are some humans involved because it feels a little bit less unbelievable that, no humans would end up being roped into all of this.
But that's what makes Percy Jackson unique in that aspect of anyone can be a villain. Like, I like that one line that, even humans can be more monsters.
Yeah, exactly.
Because people could do terrible things, but the idea that Percy Jackson can't even trust, people, like regular mortal people, is such an interesting concept. Maybe it might be explored some more, maybe it might not, but the most important thing about this is that they have an Apache attack helicopter, like, trying to shoot them in the middle of Washington, D.C., and Bianca's like, turn left right here.
So a lot of weird stuff happens with this. So Bianca is giving them advice, and then you're like, okay, so she lived in DC, and then she said, oh, yeah, well, I saw that station when Nico and I came through last summer. I remember being surprised to see it because it wasn't here when we used to live in DC. Grover frowned. New, but that station looked really old. I guess, Bianca said, but trust me, when we lived here as little kids, there was no subway. Talia sat forward. Wait a minute, no subway at all? Bianca nodded. Now, I knew nothing about DC, but I didn't see how their whole subway system could be less than 12 years old. I guess everyone else was thinking the same thing because they looked pretty confused. Bianca, Zoe said. How long ago? Her voice faltered. The sound of the helicopter was getting louder again. So was an intense kind of weird backstory thing. So like, wait, are Bianca and Nico ancient? Like, what's happening right now? I don't understand.
Maybe there's something weird about Bianca and Nico. Maybe there's more of a sinister purpose.
Yeah. Wait, are they the monsters all along? Are they the ancient monsters stirring? Maybe this is the dumbest thing I've ever said, or I'm a genius and I just figured out the plot. Those are the two options.
Well, we'll find out eventually, hopefully.
Okay.
There's plenty of things that I could say, such as that Bleep, and don't forget about that scene in Bleep.
In Redacted, exactly.
Redacted. But it may be something to like look into because it doesn't seem like something that would seem like a slip up.
Yeah, it's I don't understand how old Bianca and Nico are.
It does seem kind of weird that, Dr. Thorne was hunting half-bloods.
Yeah, I don't understand how she could be old, but she looks young. But she's not like Zoe, who's just old and looks young, but that's different because she's like a hunter who's like arrested in her aging, but so is Bianca, but just only recently. So I'm like, what is happening? I can't, like, there's nothing in the lore right now that could explain what's going on other than maybe she's actually a monster or something like that.
Are you sure about that?
I don't think so. And, well, I guess she could be, like trapped in a tree or something like Talia, maybe.
There's other things, maybe, but I don't know. I don't know any about that stuff.
Now you're just misdirecting me. I have no idea. I guess there's a couple things that could have happened that... I have no idea, Zach. I don't know. I don't know yet.
See, that's perfectly fine because as a reader, you don't know.
I just don't know.
When it comes to Rick Riordan, the one thing that I love about him that a good author will do is they'll always have a setup and then they'll have some type of payoff. Like, that's why I love Game of Thrones. Like, in Game of Thrones, there'll be, like, throwaway dialogue, like, so much, like, stupid, like, why would you bring that up?
And then it'll come back.
It'll come back in some way, shape, or form. Like, the most famous example that I noticed rereading Game of Thrones was the Lannisters will send their regards as, like, a throwaway line. and it comes back in a very, very big way.
And they say it like dramatically in a different way. Yeah, I like that kind of stuff. And I think Rick Riordan does that a lot. It's usually not super subtle. It's like not a throwaway line. It's usually more like, wait, what did you say? Huh? And then just as you're about to have like an important conversation, there are two devices that I think Rick uses a lot, which are interruption, which is them being pursued in some way. And they're like, sorry, can't explain, blah, 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 or whatever. Or like introduces an interesting idea, but then you can't have a whole conversation about it because they've been interrupted. Or you're about to get more exposition about something that's kind of interesting, but one of the characters feels uncomfortable talking about it in one way or another, which is in this case Percy, who feels insecure.
There's also a third one that I've noticed in this chapter as well, and that is Percy wakes up.
Oh, Percy wakes up. Yeah, actually, yeah, there's all three of them are in this chapter. It's him about to learn something in a dream and he'll wake up. It's him about to ask a question but telling himself that he shouldn't because of the circumstances. He's embarrassed or it's not the right time or whatever. Or there's dialogue happening already and then they get interrupted. And all of those things happen in this chapter.
Yeah, like when it comes to like young adult books, or I guess books in general, like how does one get information? Like it's actually those three branches. Like in fantasy, I'll use fantasy because that's a good example, is that you either have the wise person that like looks into an orb and like sees some information, or you get someone, telling it through dialogue, or you get it through a letter, or you get it through a situation where something happens or someone just gives like a weird random line. And that's a unique thing.
Or a dream, I guess, which is, there's a lot of dream exposition that happens in this too.
That's where the magical element comes through. Like the old man looks to the orb and like sees the future.
Yeah. Right, exactly. But it's vague. It's always vague inherently.
Well, you have to be vague inherently because you could easily like spell it out like, you see this?
But then that's the whole plot of the thing. Yeah.
Even in Harry Potter, they use the same three devices. Harry's information gets interrupted. Harry has dreams about Voldemort where he gets interrupted. And then there's, obviously the character gives the dialogue and all this stuff.
Or like he's like, yeah, he doesn't know if he can ask something. Because that's another thing too of like the social anxiety or something like that where you can't talk about a certain thing. And in this case, it's Percy being insecure that he doesn't know enough, but it's a similar thing of like, yeah, like Harry, I can't think of an example because I didn't read anything past the first book, but it's a similar thing of being like, oh, maybe I should ask Dumbledore why X, Y, and Z, but I don't have time to do that because I have to go and do this other thing.
Maybe that might not be a good example because Dumbledore would lie. Like he asks Harry.
That's true. He would also lie. That's another thing. You can't ask. Maybe he'd ask Hermione because Hermione is his Annabeth, basically. It's like this person of his own age who's willing to help him and give information.
The problem, though, is when you have a character like Annabeth or like Hermione that it's like an exposition machine, the reason why they're there is because the main character is clueless, and as the person insert for the audience, you need to have a character that can do all that stuff. That's why, like, in Star Wars, you have Ben Kenobi, where he's like explains some things about the Force, but then once he dies, like Luke has to pick up the pieces and figure it out himself. That's why you have Yoda in Empire. That's why you have
the Ewoks explaining things with their little chittering.
And then in Return of the Jedi, it's the Emperor kind of explaining things like, oh, it appears that we have a very fully operational
It's someone who knows
Death
more
Star.
than them. Yeah. It's so funny because, like, Percy's always met with these people who know more than him. And, like, one of his biggest barriers, other than literally being interrupted, is, like, he is insecure that he doesn't know a lot. And you do get the sense that, like, oh, he is, like, sort of acclimated into the culture of being a half-blood way more than he ever was, like, in the first book. But he still feels like an outsider, sort of. He's not the best at school. He's not the best at researching or reading or knowing about these things.
See, that's what makes Percy Jackson a great version of not a Gary Stu, where he's not perfect at everything. Like, he isn't the best fighter. He isn't the best at coming up with solutions. He doesn't know all the answers. And as a flawed character, that's what makes Percy Jackson such an interesting character. Like, you know that Harry is going to get on the Quidditch team. You know that Harry's going to pull the sword of Gryffindor out of the sorting hat. Yeah. Whereas Percy Jackson doesn't quite succeed. He just fails a little better each time.
He fails upward. Yeah, that is kind of, I mean, a lot of protagonists do that, and I guess you could argue that Harry does that sometimes too, where even when he's bumbling and like failing at something like Quidditch or whatever, he still ends up winning the game accidentally because he catches like the snitch's mouth or whatever. Like those kinds of things are a little bit prone for YA.
It's one of those things where you can get annoying with this, but I think Rick Riordan, even though it's a very limited thing because every story pretty much has like 6 outcomes, is that here it's appropriate to have like, okay, some characters know more, some people know less. It's okay to be interrupted, but if that's like the main plot device you're gonna keep using, you gotta change it up a little bit, or it gets really dull and repetitive. That's why I really enjoy the prophecies, because to the reader you have to interpret it your own way rather than the character really spoon feeding it to you.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And there's a reason these devices exist in a chapter like this, is because a chapter like this does serve to tell us some information, but if it told us all of the information, that would be the book, and then it would be over and you would be bored. So we do have to get interrupted. We do have to have Percy wake up from the dream. We do have to have Percy go, I'm insecure about the fact that I don't know as many things as Talia, so I'm not going to like ask her to elaborate what's going on with like the powerful magic in San Francisco or whatever.
Also, it goes back to the idea again of hubris, and like Percy Jackson's too prideful to ask for people's help, or like if he's asked a stupid question, he'd rather ask the stupid question, or like I guess blurt it out, rather than be like, hey Bianca, that was kind of weird. Why don't you elaborate a little more about, this?
Yeah, he doesn't do that.
Because an actual person wouldn't do that. They would be like, nah, I'm good. I'd rather be polite.
Yeah, it's not even necessarily politeness, but it is like insecurity. We have to remember also that he's a teenager.
Bianca's a girl, and I can't really talk to pretty girls.
Yeah, exactly. Like, what does that mean? Oh, yeah, I totally know what is going on.
To be fair, when you're 14, you think you know everything. You know nothing.
You know nothing, Jon Snow. Yeah, he doesn't know anything, but he also knows he doesn't know anything because he self-identifies as not that smart in a lot of ways. Like, he always talks about how he's a failure, and in the first book, he's always talking about is like, oh, my ADHD, my dyslexia, I'm just bad at everything that I do. So I think some of that, he's gained a lot of confidence being a demigod. He's good at being a demigod, but I think certain aspects of being a demigod, like we've talked about, like research and learning and knowing the stories behind these myths that inform his day-to-day life, he's not very good at that, and I think he feels sort of insecure about it still.
Well, that's what makes Percy Jackson a great character is how often do you have a character that's very insecure in the, like, not proper things, but like things that are very like realistically insecure, rather than like, I have to defeat the main villain, but I don't know if I have enough power.
Exactly, not a relatable way. Yeah, exactly. It's a more relatable thing of like, oh, I'm a teenager and I feel like I'm not as smart as my friend or something. Like, that's like, a lot of kids feel that way.
It's a very human thing, especially it's like the idea of like, hey, I'm not funny, but my friend over there, he's like super freaking hilarious, but really, you're funny. You just don't realize it.
Yeah, I kind of feel bad for Percy because I think he doesn't give himself enough credit sometimes, because he has like this street smarts way about him where he's like, for instance, like the way he does the problem solving thing with the astronaut ice cream, like he does solve problems and figure things out on his own, so he kind of doesn't always give himself enough credit.
That's another like philosophical debate about like what is like smart, like is it street smart, is it book smarts? It's Percy Jackson can do a lot more things better than most people. Like, he comes up with things a lot faster. He can come up with solutions to problems in a different way.
He's not book smart, though. He's not learned.
He's an idiot when it comes to book smarts. But Percy Jackson can do things because I'm about to say he grew up on the streets, but that's not even true. There's like that archetype in books. Like, again, I'll use fantasy. There's always like the roguish type, or the person that like grew up like super dirt poor and they somehow rise up to like be king. Percy comes from pretty much like middle America. Like, he's a middle class boy who has aspirations of really much nothing in the beginning of the books. He's just like, yeah, I'm just living my life, just trying to go to school and trying to make my mom happy. Now he's risen to the position of, I have to save the world from the god of time. Moving on a little bit, they're able to swerve out of the Apache helicopter. They go into the subway and they end up at a shipyard or a shipment place because, they go to the end of the line. So they're like...
Yeah, it's all like the freight trains and stuff.
The best way to describe the summary, if I was to give a summary for this, is Percy Jackson and the gang ride the rails.
They ride the rails. Yeah, here comes the trope of the magical homeless person, which you may recall is also in the Polar Express, where a homeless person appears like magic and is like, I'm going to help you with a thing.
And that's actually a trope. That's the sad thing, is that the magical homeless person, or you think is a homeless person, is not really a homeless person.
Yeah, they're never actually homeless. They're like actually like a ghost or a god or something pretending to be homeless.
Every time I see a homeless person in Percy Jackson, I'm like, yeah, that guy's totally homeless.
That's not a real dude. Anyway, so he shows up and is like pitying them, which is I found funny at first because I didn't realize who he was.
We know it's Apollo. What do you think like his hobo name would be? I want to say it's like Bindles or like
Bindles.
Bubba Joe.
Bindles, Apollo. I mean, Sonny, obviously.
Oh, that's so good. I didn't even think about that.
Right? Yeah. Look, I'm a genius, you guys. Also, I don't think people are hobos anymore. Like, homeless people in the 20s who rode the rails and lived a specific life, that's a hobo. People without homes are homeless people. They're not hobos.
It's not one of those things. Surprisingly, the word hobo isn't like a derogatory term because it has this weird
it has like
idea
a culture,
of endearment. Yeah. Because there are hobo conventions. There are people that want to live the
people
hobo
who
lifestyle.
self-identify as a hobo. I think this is just a homeless guy, though.
What ends up happening is that Percy Jackson and the gang meet up with this homeless person who's like literally the most stereotypical thing possible. Like has like a garbage fire going, and he's just like, "You want to share this barrel with me, kids? I may be a murderer."
This is what the description says. It says, a homeless guy was standing at a trash can fire. We must have looked pretty pathetic because he gave us a toothless grin and said, y'all need to get warmed up. Come on over. Thank goodness that this is Apollo, because then this weird thing happens where Grover says, my hooves are frozen, and then feet I corrected for the sake of the homeless guy. Like, if he had heard someone say my hooves, like, you guys, you're kind of blowing up your spot here.
For all Grover knows, my hooves is probably some hobo slang for his frozen feet.
That's true. Like my dogs are barking. My hooves are killing me.
I like the conversation they kind of have because the more they're talking, the crazier they sound. If you think that this person's just a regular homeless person, like these kids are insane. He's just like, I don't want to be remotely near these people, and I murder people.
For a brief second, because they were focusing on him a lot, I was afraid that he was going to be like a dangerous character. So that was a relief that wasn't the case.
No, because, they do the old-fashioned thing of he says something's kind of weird, and Percy Jackson turns his head, and he's gone. Wah, wah, wah. Though he points him in the right direction to, hey, there's that train that's going all the way to California way. You should hop on it.
California way. What a perfect advice where they turn and literally right there is the exact train that they need.
Yeah, like almost like magic. And this is where the gang rides the rails.
They ride the rails for the second time.
And then it hard cuts to they're all sitting in their respected cars. And I want to read the description of this because each person has a different personality with their car. And I think that's so unique.
They do.
This is just like an interesting thing because this is just a character dynamic and being able to describe this. Plus, the car that they're in is kind of like the respective personality that they have. An hour later, we were rumbling west. There was no problem about who would drive now because we all got our own luxury car. Zoe and Bianca were crashed out in a Lexus on the top deck. Grover was playing race car driver behind the wheel in a Lamborghini, and Thalia had hot-wired a radio in a black Mercedes SLK, and she could pick up the alt-rock station from DC. The radio was playing the White Stripes. I knew the song because it was one of the CDs that my mom owned. I love the idea that Thalia just loves music this way, and of course, she's the edgy edgelord where she listens to alt-rock.
All the music I listened to back then.
She's like the embodiment of every emo kid back in the 2010s and earlier. Like, if this was any more edgier, like, she'd have, like, her hair, like, over her eyes, and she'd have,
Oh, yeah, the scene kid stuff. This is a bit early for that, maybe, or... No, it's around that time.
No, it's exactly around that time, because she seems like the person would have, like, she would dye her hair in, like, different stripes of, like, bleach. I like the conversation they have about this, because, Thalia hasn't seen Luke yet, but she knows that she has to fight him, and she doesn't want to.
Yeah, you know this already. She had this altercation with Zoe. You know that they have some sort of weird beef from a while ago. She says some sort of thing about how she always, worried too much about boys. Or there's, that line that happened maybe last chapter or the chapter before. I think it was last chapter. So you know that that's a thing. And you know that she has a history with Luke. So it all kind of falls into place. You understand, okay, of course, yeah, she was being pursued to be a hunter of Artemis, which is something that I guessed before. That's not surprising. Yeah, this is kind of like just making text what was subtext, this conversation.
Yeah, especially when it came to this chapter, you're looking at this with a different subtext, but also it makes sense why she has a grudge on Zoe and the hunters because they pretty much like, well, you can either all come with us except for Luke, or you all can die. And they chose kind of like, we're not going with you guys because we're not going to abandon Luke.
And then this is kind of when Percy says maybe not the best thing to Talia. The hunters tried to recruit you, I guessed. Her eyes got dangerously bright. I thought she was going to zap me out of the Mercedes, but she just sighed. I almost joined them, she admitted. Luke, Annabeth, and I ran into them once, and Zoe tried to convince me. She almost did, but Talia's fingers gripped the wheel. I would have had to leave Luke. Oh, Zoe and I got into a fight. She told me I was being stupid. She said I'd regret my choice. She said Luke would let me down someday. I watched the sun through the metal curtain. We seemed to be traveling faster each second, shadows flickering like an old movie projector. That's harsh, I said. Hard to admit. Zoe was right. She wasn't right. Luke never let me down, never. We'll have to fight him, I said. There's no way around it. Talia didn't answer.
So here's the problem that I have is that with this conversation, it makes it sound like Thalia's a little lukewarm on the subject of Luke.
Okay. This one again.
Thank you. I'm here all night.
Yeah, try the veal. All right, continue.
Yeah, that's an interesting dynamic of you have a person that is obviously, we know through the last couple books that he is a effing monster. Like,
yeah, he's
he
terrible.
is a terrible person. But Thalia hasn't experienced it with her own eyes. They've never actually had like a chance to meet face to face.
He's just an abstract concept to her right now, as far as new villain Luke.
Thalia's last time she saw Luke was he was running for his life trying to get to the camp, and she did her last stand. Yeah.
Right. It's a totally different context. Yeah. So in her mind, he's still the same Luke. It's still the same Luke who worked together with her and Annabeth. They have all this history together. She logically knows all the bad stuff that he's done, but I don't think that she can tangibly understand it.
That's totally acceptable for a person that's in total denial because, you know, they want to believe everything other than the truth.
She's in denial for sure.
And even this book doesn't even take place in Egypt.
Yeah, exactly. Like, just even the way that she says, Luke never let me down. And at first you think, of course he did. He let everyone down. But no, he never let her down. He let other people down. He let Half-Bloods as a whole down. He betrayed a lot of people, but he never specifically let down Talia. So in her mind, that, loyalty still stands with him.
Well, especially with Luke is that Thalia died, but the only Luke that she got to saw was before he became cynical and bitter to the gods. Because the reason why they all left home was because they were the outcasts and they didn't understand their purpose, and they kind of formed this weird Stockholm syndrome group of going across country to finally get to Camp Half-Blood. And when they get there, no one's gonna help them. Thalia dies. The hunters of Artemis turn their back on them. They could have easily have escorted them to camp. Again, Luke is a monster, but it's the idea of him being a total monster. He actually has some reason to his madness. Every time he's had this experience, it's just blown up in his face, and Thalia hasn't seen that yet. Luke has seen that because he experiences it. He's tried to kill Percy, he's tried to kill Annabeth, but they haven't met. It's going to be a really interesting interaction when we see Thalia versus Luke, if that ever happens, or what might happen, because it sounds very tropey of, I love him, so I'm going to go to his side type of mentality.
Yeah, there's a lot going on. There's a lot of grudges and history between these characters.
Especially with this line of dialogue I'm about to bring up, because when I was reading this, it's a very intense scene, and I can easily see this in a show or a movie, and it's this. We'll have to fight him, I said. There's no way around it. Thalia didn't answer. You haven't seen him lately, I warned. I know it's hard to believe, but I'll do what I have to. Even if it means killing him? Do me a favor, she said. Get out of my car. I felt so bad for her, I didn't argue.
It's a rough conversation to have.
I know I've brought this up so many times, but the idea of a friend killing a friend or a kid killing a kid is effing horrific.
Yeah, a child killing another child who was her friend is a very heavy topic.
Well, yeah, because it's killing innocence itself.
Jeez, I'm trying to think whether or not Talia would agree to kill him or not. And now I'm what's the prophecy again with the person who turned 16? And is she going to make an important choice? She's a more interesting character. It's interesting if she's the person in the prophecy because she's the big three, and she has like stake in taking Luke's side. Well, like I don't think Percy would ever take Luke's side. That's less of a choice for him.
Well, no, Luke tried to kill him. That was the biggest mistake he ever made.
It's different for him. It's Percy thinks, oh, obviously I'm on the side of the good guys. I would always choose to fight against you. But Talia's more complicated, and you could say, oh, I have to do what I have to do, and I'll kill him if I have to. But like, she doesn't ever actually say that. She just says, do me a favor, get out of my car.
And there's actually a great sentence in this chapter that actually backs this up, and I'm going to read it right now. Thalia with her ratty clothes and her rebel attitude. But there was something similar about them, too. The same kind of toughness. Right now, sitting in the shadow with a gloomy expression, Thalia looked a lot like one of the hunters. The idea of, she's a rebel. She has a rebel attitude. Like, she's a rebel without a cause.
Yeah, and it's weird because in some ways, the hunters have to, like, make no emotional attachments. And she has such a strong emotional attachment to Luke. So it's like, she is a lot like a hunter in superficially, but that's, like, such an important aspect of them is you kind of have to like throw away this connection to this boy that you care about or whatever. And I don't know if she could do that.
If we look at Thalia on like the chart of like morality, she is total neutral. She doesn't really have a side. She sways to one side to the other, but in the end, like she's as neutral as it gets in this conflict because she's been dead and she has nothing to lose other than she's lost everything already. Her mom's dead, she has no family, and it's just her.
And she has a lot of weird, complicated allegiances, because in some ways she's very loyal to the idea of Camp Half-Blood, but she's also like, she has a complicated history with Percy, and they don't always see eye to eye, and they bicker and disagree, and yeah, I could just easily see her taking Luke's side when it came to that making that decision, and that's kind of like a scary thing to know about this protagonist, or one of the, I guess, co-protagonists of this story.
So Percy decides to kick it in the back of Grover's Lamborghini, and it's like one of those jokes where like he looks into the rearview mirror and Apollo is just there as a hobo, good old Sonny. Sonny smiles.
It's interesting. It's actually like the apparition of Apollo, or it's just Apollo, I guess. He appears out of nowhere and convinces Percy to dream as a hobo, so we realize it's him. He tells Percy to dream because it'll like help him figure stuff out, which is an interesting piece of advice.
Especially that Apollo is the god of prophecies, or one of his jobs.
He is. He talks about that. And then he even says, he's like, oh, it's like my oracle. And he's like, why can't you just tell me what the oracle means? And then he's like, well, I don't actually know. Goodbye.
Oracles don't work that way, silly boy.
Yeah. Did you notice that he says the word podcast in this chapter?
I was just about to bring that up, B. Yeah. And like I have the biggest grin because he comes up with a haiku. I'm going to read this. Are you ready for this fire haiku?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, and then I'm gonna snap afterwards. Okay, here we go. Here's the poem.
Dreams like a podcast, downloading truth in my ears. They tell me cool stuff. So you know what we could do, B? We could like take that as a pull quote, and we could put that in our show. Like this is actually
make that the review. Apollo thinks that our podcast is great. The sun god thinks we're awesome.
Yeah, we could totally make that like a pull quote for like our show, like how sometimes people like will put like from famous people, we'll put one from Apollo. Until we get one from Rick Riordan, then we'll put that on our show, which would be funny. That would be a day that I would be like, huh.
That would be a day. I love that that's how he guesses that it's Apollo, is his crappy haiku. And then he's like, Apollo? I figure nobody else could make a haiku that bad.
Another joke they could have done is like, I'm Apollo, and Percy's like, yeah, I know. The hobo outfit didn't easily gave it away. I'm sorry. Oh, I thought it was so good. I got the smell right and everything.
Yeah. It's so funny because then he's like, Apollo is like, I'm incognito. Call me Fred. A god named Fred. So yeah, I guess it isn't Sonny. That's not his incognito name. It's just Fred.
I like the conversation that Apollo and Percy have because, again, they're talking about prophecies and they're talking about like kind of like the idea of dreams within dreams, fates within fates. Like, is a prophecy really set in stone? And it's one of those unique aspects of Percy Jackson that, again, I think it's a conversation for another time, but having the idea of like what is really a prophecy and you're talking to the god that is prophecy is a unique thing.
And he doesn't even know what his prophecies are. So this is an interesting conversation they have because when they're talking about the monster, he says, no, but there is one who might. If you haven't yet found the monster when you reach San Francisco, seek out Nereus, the old man of the sea. He has a long memory and a sharp eye. He has the gift of knowledge, sometimes kept obscure from my oracle. But it's your oracle, I protested. Can't you tell us what the prophecy means? Apollo sighed. You might as well ask an artist to explain his art, or ask a poet to explain his poem. It defeats the purpose. The meaning is only clear through the search. In other words, you don't know. Apollo checked his watch. Look at the time. I have to run. I doubt I can risk helping you again, Percy, but remember what I said. Get some sleep. And when you return, I expect a good haiku about your journey.
You know what the funny thing about that conversation is? Thinking about that is kind of like what we do is like people talk about, it's like, oh, what is the artist's intention? And then people overanalyze things. Like, isn't that what we're doing with this book series?
That's literally what this podcast is about.
It's like the artist like used blue because he didn't have anything else, but someone's like, well, he used the color blue because it represents his sadness.
It represents
and
his depression. Yeah, exactly.
And it's like, I just wanted to use blue because the sky is blue. I love this conversation, especially. Whoop, whoop, look at the time. I gotta go.
Yeah. That's almost like a joke line that I would come up with for what he said, but that's legitimately what he said. He said, look at the time, gotta go, and then he disappears.
He pulls like a pocket watch from his like hobo shabs. Oh, look at that.
Yeah, he's just like the magical homeless guy from Polar Express who just snaps his fingers and disappears into like dust, basically.
But luckily, Percy Jackson ends up going to sleep as always. Wah, 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 wah.
And he has a dream. I love that this is like a very serious dream, sort of, that has a lot of interesting...
It's not a dream, it's a flashback sequence, which is something new in Percy Jackson.
It's a dream and flashback sequence at the same time, but I love that it's like kind of serious, but it starts with, I was wearing an old-fashioned Greek tunic, which was a little too breezy downstairs. Like, okay, Rick, you still have to be goofy. Okay, I get it.
Well, again, it brings back the idea of seriousness, but also you can have funny things. Like, you kind of have the serious beat, but Rick Riordan always has to add that comedy beat to it just to relieve the stress of between transitions, like with the dream. Here, it's perfect. I love that we have this kind of like, I guess, dream flashback sequence where Percy Jackson's playing this guy and he's being escorted by this girl that kind of looks very familiar for some weird reason. Like, I know you.
It's like, I know you. And he has the Nemean lion skin, but it's not a jacket. It's now actually the lion skin cape.
I just like this whole scene because it's a very, like, the way you would probably do it is in a movie. It's very, like, wishy-washy and things wouldn't make quite much sense. The best way I would put it is, like, the loading sequences in the Animus and the Assassin's Creed series.
Yeah, they're, like, very, for lack of a better word, dreamlike.
This girl's protecting Percy. He's like, you gotta go. This is gonna kill you. And Percy is talking, but it's him, but not him at the same time, which is really weird to think about.
Yeah, it's like he's not controlling his voice, sort of.
The boy formerly known as Percy Jackson.
Yeah. All of a sudden his voice is deeper, too, which is kind of funny. My voice sounded deeper, much more confident, instead of just being like, I'm Percy.
Instead of, hey guys, I don't need saving, to hey guys, I don't need saving.
Yeah, exactly.
Is this puberty?
It always is. Do you notice that the phrase "my immortal" is in this? Is the phrase "my immortal power"?
Oh, is it B? Is it? Did I purposely make a "my immortal" joke because it's in this chapter?
They say "my immortal."
Oh my God, Zoe wrote "my immortal." No, it makes sense now.
Zoe wrote "my immortal." That's what it is. I thought it was Talia.
It makes sense because she hates most men, and she likes Draco Malfoy. And everyone that's a poser, she hates. Oh my God.
Yep, she's gothic. Yeah, makes sense. Totally tracks. So yeah, this is kind of like a weird dream sequence. There's a lot of strange minutia going on. So there's this girl who we recognize who, I mean, I guess it's like the sort of like plot twist at the end, like, oh, it's Zoe. It's Zoe, you guys. That's the girl in the dream. He's dressed as an ancient Greek. I don't know if he's supposed to be himself. It's kind of confusing. He's someone else. Yeah, it's a flash. So he's like living as someone else. Yeah, they're in like a garden and they're very stressed. Mostly Zoe's stressed and keeps being like, run or whatever. And then he's like, you shouldn't be afraid.
Well, this monster's going to kill you if he gets you. And I love this because it's just like there's so many questions and answers that you don't get.
Ladon? Is that the name of the monster?
Leiden?
It's kind of confusing Because then there's like this whole thing where she says, "You must go around up the mountain to my father. It is the only way." Like up the mount, like what? Mount Olympus is her Who's her father? I'm just what?
Maybe that might be some context clues there. Who knows? There's other people that have to be on top of mountains.
Mm-hmm. That's true. I don't know enough about things to guess.
There's plenty of things to guess about with Zoe and how sinister nature things are. But it's so cool that we have, the scene, the big twist, like the big stinger moment where, have the sound sting and then fade to black is that I guess the best way to put it is, again, I'm rewatching Game of Thrones and they have like this big moment at the end and then just hard cuts. It's something similar to this where Zoe gives this guy this hairpiece decoration that she has, and it turns into a sword. And Percy knows what the sword is because it's Riptide. And this is where things are repeating themselves because Zoe named Riptide Analakis because she is like the daughter, or her mom or whoever was like this daughter of the sea. So she names it Riptide because that's the type of current that snatches people to their death.
Yeah, my mother, Pleione, gave it to me. She was a daughter of the ocean. I don't know who Pleione is in ancient Greek. I don't know how she relates to everything.
And I recommend not looking that up.
Not looking it up because that'll probably spoil stuff. Yeah.
It might spoil stuff. Who knows? We're probably going to get like 16 messages about it. Who knows? And that it like hard cuts to realizing that Percy Jackson wakes up and realizes that girl, he like turns his head and like looks at her and she's like scowling like she's looking at like a magazine that says Boy's Life.
Yeah. It's kind of funny because I don't understand why Percy doesn't immediately go, "Oh, it's Zoe." Like he recognizes her. Of course it's Zoe.
It's a nice twist that, we have a sword with its name means it has a history to it. And the sword still has the name Riptide, so it's standing the test of time. And we have the person that named that sword. Yeah, and the chapter kind of just ends right there. So B, what is the name of the next chapter?
The name of the next chapter is, oh geez. This is like the most esoteric name for a chapter that maybe we've ever had. I go snowboarding with a pig.
Oh, a pig you say?
I don't know. There's a pig. They go snowboarding. I think they do literally go snowboarding. I don't know if it's a literal pig.
But what do you think is going to happen now?
Okay, I don't even know anymore. I don't even have the remote idea. I think they're probably going to show up at a place where there's snowboarding, but other than that, I don't know why a pig would be involved. They're just traveling across the country at this point. I don't know what thread needs to be followed immediately. I don't know if he's going to immediately, or Percy's going to immediately talk to Talia about what the heck that whole conversation was with, like, the whole powerful Titan magic in San Francisco. There's a couple things that I guess they're probably going to eventually follow up on, but they're not at San Francisco yet, so right now it's just sort of, I think, maybe going to be not like a plot heavy chapter, and it's more just gonna be like, we're gonna get sidetracked in this one location on our way to our destination. But that's my guess. Maybe something important happens. I have no idea. There's gonna be a pig. Maybe there won't be a pig. Maybe does he go snowboarding with a cop?
A pig cop? Oh man.
No, just a normal cop. Anyway, did we get any listener correspondence?
So we have an email that says, "Please don't read my name on the podcast if you read this. Hi, I'm a big fan. I started reading the Percy Jackson series about a year ago and have been reading along ever since, trying to read the books as soon as they get out. I get frustrated when you guys forget what Greek characters, what they're in quotation marks, is placed to what to see, and you get their names wrong. Sincerely, blankety blank."
Yeah, I mean, we do sometimes get it wrong. We're not mythology experts, either of us. We've talked about this before. It's hard to balance learning about mythology and not getting spoiled inherently by the stuff that's drawn from mythology that informs what the plot's going to be. I try not to do too much preliminary research just because it's like literally just my first interpretation of how I'm reading the book at the time. I mean, especially because that's kind of my role in all of this, is that I'm not supposed to know too much. I'm always afraid of spoilers. It's kind of an endless thing. And yeah, I don't know. And then the pronunciation thing, I know that sometimes we get it wrong and we're sorry about that, but also there's not necessarily one right way to say some of these words.
For me, like, you could easily like apologize until like, your throat's like sore from apologizing. I guess the fact of the matter is like, when it comes to our show, like we're doing this to have fun, and if we get things wrong, that's okay. It's not the end of the world. Like, I went to a talk at the Getty Villa about mythology, and this is what made my brain hurt because I kept saying Chiron completely wrong, and no one really corrected me. This professor was like, "Oh yeah, Chiron," and I'm like, "Oh what?" Because everyone kept saying it wrong. Like, a lot of the times when it comes to actually pronunciations, a lot of it is lost in translation because no one speaks ancient Greek anymore. Like, they speak a different.
It's a dead language.
It's not a language. It's like Latin. Like, people are going to develop accents, especially when it comes to mispronouncing words and stuff. But it's one of those things where, we appreciate when people bring things up. I like being corrected, though when it comes to, criticism, it needs to be something constructive rather than, hey, guys, don't get this. You guys are getting this wrong. Okay, how are we getting it wrong? How do we say it? Like, if people gave us like guides of like saying things and things that are proper, we'd really, we like that. We like to be as respectful as possible when it comes to the material because we know people are really passionate about this and they devote a lot of their time to like researching the myths and legends and stuff. Whereas we have two schlubs on a microphone that are, just talking and having fun.
We're two schlubs with microphones. That's our official podcast description.
That's our new podcast, Two Schlubs with a Microphone.
We got another email. This podcast is amazing. I feel that you should read the Percy Jackson Heroes or Gods, I think. Is that Greek Heroes or Gods?
Yeah, that's the supplemental material that Rick Riordan did. It's like the kind of like Percy Jackson humor, but in the actual like mythology for like Greek gods or the Greek heroes.
Maybe we should do that as like a bonus episode or something sometime. That might be a thing.
That would be a fun one because the illustrations are made by John Rococo. I think that's how you pronounce his last name, but he did the illustrated version of The Lightning Thief, which is a beautiful book.
Yeah, I'd be interested in doing that. That'd be cool. Also, teach me a little bit about mythology when very clearly I am bad at it. This is the best podcast I've ever heard. Wow, thank you. It is so straight to the point and it brightens my days. I also wrote an iTunes review, and I don't think it's sent. You are truly the only podcast I listen to nowadays. I'm thinking about how I should start a podcast. Could you help me with any tips and tricks of any sort? Lots of, oh no, I'm losing connection, bye.
Oh no, it's like a train going through a tunnel. You're breaking up. I can't hear you. Bye.
Yeah, I don't know if I could give you that much advice about podcasting other than just do it, like that Shia LaBeouf meme. Get a microphone that you can afford and just start doing it and try to like learn as much as you can. Like,
I think this is my department.
Yeah, it's more your department. I don't actually edit the show. I can do audio editing, but it's not like my main role on the show.
For me, from like all the years of podcasting, the best advice I can give are three things. The first is you should do your podcast no matter what anyone tells you. Second is be consistent. Like, as long as you're producing content like weekly or whenever you're doing it, not just like once every 3 years, do the podcast. Do it any way you want to do it with that. And 3, just have fun, because having a podcast, I can guarantee you our show doesn't make any money. So if you're going into that thinking that you're going to make money, sometimes we make money, but it's not the main thing. And the most important thing is when you first start out, don't look at your numbers. Just pretend you have 1 billion people listening to your show and you will go far.
Yeah, but at the same time, do it for yourself. So, like, you're going to get some people who are not going to like what you say, but that's fine, because you're going to get some people in real life who don't like what you say, but you'll find, the folks that care about the thing you're talking about. And as far as, like, the nitty-gritty stuff, it's about, like, there's literally tons of tutorials and, like, YouTube videos and online courses and things like that. You can, learn how to use Audacity or other, like, audio editing software that's available for free or cheap, and just try to find a platform, either like what do we use, Libsyn for? Yeah,
we use Libsyn, but there's also Anchor. There's a lot of other places you can use, and the most important advice I can give as well is just have fun, and that's about it. Short, simple, have fun, because podcasting is a hobby. Some people make it into a job, but it's one of those things where it should always be fun first, then work second.
Okay, so yes, we got another email that says, "Hi, Zack and B. I'm the listener with lots of suggestions. Sorry, I was still on the Lightning Thief episodes when I subscribed to your Patreon, so I mentioned a lot of the stuff you mentioned afterwards. I've reread all the books. I'm now all caught up in your episodes and obviously happy with my decision to enroll in your Patreon, as I love to hear your podcast while at work." Oh, that's very nice of you. Thank you for giving to the Patreon.
Thank you.
I know you will still take some time to go through all the books, but I'm in this for the long haul. Just a few random comments. I had never thought about how selfish Bianca's decision to leave Nico and join the Hunters was until you guys mentioned it. I always saw it as a bit rough, but after listening to you, I realized it was kind of really neglectful on her part. I know you had on Joe Trace, but have you considered the possibility of going to see the show, or maybe listening to the soundtrack, or maybe you already did? I don't know. Just a quick note on awkward teen phases you sometimes mention. My Messenger MSN nickname and for a while on Facebook was Son of Poseidon, so cool but cringy. Bye for now, your attentive listeners, Son of Poseidon, Nuno Diaz. P.S. for English speakers, I think Nuno could be read as no. I thought it was Nuno too. I guess it doesn't have a tilde on it.
Maybe that might be it, because I have a friend that's how they pronounce their name, and that's how it's spelled, is Nuno. I mean, then again, there's different interpretations of how you say things, so if we get it wrong, we apologize. So we did get actually one voicemail, because I think we've just to set this up where anyone can call in the show and talk about us. And are you ready to hear it, B?
My name is Trey, and I am a big Radio Camp Half-Blood fan. At least I hope this is the right number. I found it like a couple months ago. I started it from the beginning until I caught up. I think I'm really excited for your 1-year anniversary. Congratulations. I love Percy Jackson because it has so much humor and adventure, and I'm around, when I started reading the series, I was around the same age as Percy, and the book I'm on now, well, he's almost 17, so not the same thing, but still it's awesome fantasy, awesome humor. I'm the person who a couple episodes ago left an iTunes review that was, I'm going to make an animation for Horsing Around. I hope you guys able to wait for that, because my computer's broken. I'm so excited. Alright. Bye, Zack and B. You're the greatest podcasters. Bye.
Oh, thank you. That was such a nice message. That's really sweet. I like that you mention about the horsing around animation. I'm still waiting for that. I can't wait.
Yeah, it's a very sweet message. I can't believe someone actually finally used the voicemail. It's just, I always think of like the weird, like dusty voicemail tape is just sitting on my desk somewhere with like all these recordings. And it's so nice and sweet, especially, you know, being a passionate fan that takes the time to call the show and also trying to make an animation for Horsing Around.
Horsing around. Ding.
Eventually, we're going to have it where it's going to have like just like a sitcom feel. Like we might just make like an audio drama for Horsing Around, just get it out of our system.
Yeah, I think we gotta fully just make this a reality.
I want someone to make us a Horsing Around like image so that we could actually put on a t-shirt. Like a whole like movie poster.
Yeah, I really want a Horse Around t-shirt. I would wear that t-shirt. No one would understand what it was. And I do not care.
Until you find the one person that has listened to our show and like, wow.
That would be insane. Or they would think it's like a BoJack Horseman reference, maybe.
Maybe. Or it'd be funny because it's just like, wow, I love that show. Do you listen to it? And you're just like, yeah, I listened to it.
But they don't actually know that I'm B because no one knows what I look like. That's not true. You could see my face on Twitter, but I don't know. A lot of people don't know what I look like.
So B, did we get any iTunes reviews?
We got a few iTunes reviews. One is Happy Anniversary from the Animator Boy, who says, Happy 1-year anniversary. I think it is great that you guys are doing a podcast on PJO, and you are still doing it. Whenever I found y'all on Spotify, I thought, let's see what episode they stopped at, but then I saw that you were still making episodes. I was so thrilled when I saw that and immediately started listening to our mythical introduction episode, and I caught up right when you started the Titan's Curse. Convenient. I'm the same kid who said he would make a Horse Around trailer animation, so this is the same person who sent us a voicemail. But a very unfortunate event, wink, wink, happened. My computer broke, so that will have to be delayed for a long time before it is fixed. The curses. The world is conspiring against us.
So what you do is you take your phone and you start hand-drawing like old like Walt Disney animation, like cell animation, and you just do it that way.
Exactly.
So we got a new iTunes review that says, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And the description says, this podcast is so funny. I like it, and B is so funny. They are going to love the rest of the books. And I'm only on Sea of Monsters, episode 12, and I love it. And you guys complete my day.
My day. Thank you. That's great. Only on Sea of Monsters, you got a lot of catching up to do. We're doing, Titan's Curse right now. We're going to keep going until we drop dead.
They're doing some binge listening, too. So, they're already at episode 12, yeah.
That's true. They're probably going to catch up pretty quickly.
It's going to be that one time where people just like, man, there's like 16 more episodes I got to do. I'm just going to listen to them all in one day.
Yeah, I have done that. I have binge listened many a time.
That's how I got through My Favorite Murder. I'm all caught up.
I almost binge listened with my Bim Bam, but then the episodes got older, I was like, I'm kind of done.
Thank you so much for that wonderful iTunes review. I think that kind of like wraps up the show, B. I think our Minotaur is loose again in the studio.
Again, why don't you ever lock that thing?
B, do you know how hard it is to put celestial bronze chains on a Minotaur?
It's very hard.
Yeah, I ripped my arm off a couple days ago. It was kind of awkward. Yeah, I had to ask him to give it back.
You have no arm?
I got better.
How do you edit? Oh, you got it back. You stuck it back on. Mm-hmm.
I used some
a
Wonder
little
Glue.
bit of like Mighty Putty, stuck it back on there.
So B, where can they find you?
You can find me on Tumblr at twinpoetry.tumblr.com, and you can find me on Instagram and Twitter at bkellygorman.
If you want to find me, you can find me on Twitter at Suda41. That's SUDA41. If you want to follow our show on Twitter, that's at halfblood_radio. And if you want to email our show, you can email us at radiocamphalfblood@gmail.com. We also have a Patreon, so if you go to patreon.com/radiocamphalfblood, you'll get some exclusive bonus content, such as reviews, one that's coming up very, very soon. I'm still editing it.
Very soon.
It's just taking a while because so much crazy stuff's been happening. We're going to be doing Ready Player One by Ernest Cline. Other than that, we have a t-shirt page. I go to TeePublic and type in Radio Camp Half-Blood. We have stickers, we got coffee cups, we got pillows, we got shirts. It's the works. You can get everything. You can get a Radio Camp Half-Blood special. Just get everything.
It's true. And as I mention every episode, annoyingly, you can still get a Camp Half-Blood, Radio Camp Half-Blood pin if you become a $10 month subscriber on our Patreon. You will get a cool pin with Radio Camp Half-Blood on it.
Yes, and I promise you that we won't patronize you.
Yeah. Just it'll be really cool. You can ask people. I make some cool pins. It'll be great.
Let's just say they're so exclusive that even I don't have one.
You don't own one because I literally make them one at a time by hand with my tiny little hands in my kitchen.
In the back of my head, when you're making these pins, I'm thinking of like you walk into your kitchen and it turns into like a little elf kitchen. Like you have like the little gingerbread and like for some reason like you have like a smokestack on your oven and you make it with like love and affection.
Yep. It's true. That's exactly how the pins are made. It's very adorable.
B, why weren't you at elf practice today?
I was busy making pins for my podcast because I'm the podcast elf. Anyway, we're getting very sidetracked. I think it's time to go.
Oh, I like how it's past Christmas and we're still making Christmas.
Because Christmas is always with us in our hearts, even though that you're Jewish.
Yes, in my cold, bitter heart, I still believe in Christmas and the birth of Christ.
I don't even believe in the birth of Christ. I celebrate Christmas. Anyway, you have to believe in Santa, though. That's the one requirement.
If you've watched Elf, you got to know that if you don't believe in Santa, he's going to fall right out of the effing sky.
He's going to fall out of the sky and then die. Wow, dark implications. Okay, we truly need to wrap it up.
I'm Zach.
I'm B.
And keep staying mortal. Bye.
Bye, guys.
I'm
B.
Zach. And keep
Bye,
staying
guys.
mortal. Bye.